Good day and welcome to Agenda. I'm Danie Laurel, sitting in today for Cito Beltran. We are One News, all sides, all the time. Now for today's starter quote, it goes, when things don't add up in your life, start subtracting. Life gets a lot simpler when you clear the clutter that makes it complicated. Meanwhile, it's now time to take a look at the front page of the Philippine Star. Finance Secretary Benjamin Diokno is pushing for a review of the free college education in state universities and colleges. Diokno is proposing the revisit after saying that the program is inefficient and wasteful. The Group Alliance of Concerned Teachers slammed the secretary's stance, saying that scrimping on college education subsidy appears contemptuous of our Filipino youth. Meanwhile, President Bongbong Marcos will head to Jakarta, Indonesia today to join the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or the ASEAN Summit. Marcos is expected to hold bilateral meetings with leaders of Cambodia, South Korea, Timor-Leste, and Vietnam. Now, aside from the United States and Japan, the United Kingdom might become the next partner of the Philippine Coast Guard, or the PCG, in joining maritime exercises. PCG spokesman Armand Balilo told the Philippine Star that UK Foreign Minister James Cleverly showed a keen interest in exploring opportunities with the Philippines. And rainfall in Luzon will persist until at least tomorrow as an effect of Typhoon Hana and the southwest monsoon. The typhoon, which was earlier forecasted to exit Philippine territory last night or this morning, has been slow-moving, says Pag-asa. The price cap for rice will take effect tomorrow, September 5th, and farmers and rice retailers, however, have some reservations about the cap's effectiveness. We will discuss more of these with our two guests for today, but first, let's watch this video.
President Bongbong Marcos has set the cap on rice prices nationwide. Under EO number 39, the price ceiling for regular milled rice is set at 41 pesos per kilogram. The cap, meanwhile, for well-milled rice is 45 pesos per kilogram. The rice price cap will take effect on September 5. The trade industry and local government units will be on top of the policy's implementation to make sure that stakeholders follow the new price ceiling. Farmers and rice retailers, however, expressed concern that the price cap will cause them to lose money and may even push them to stop selling rice. Let's discuss the ins and outs of the price cap on today's agenda.
Engineer Rosendo is the president of the Samahang Industriya ng Agrikultura, or Sinag. He is also the chairman of Ibon party list. Leonardo Montemayor is the chairman of the Federation of Free Farmers. Prior to this, he served as congressman for the ABA party list. Montemayor was also an agriculture secretary, serving during the term of former President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo.
Okay, good day to Sinag President Rosendo and of course Federation of Free Farmers Chairman Leonardo Montemayor. Good day, sir, in this rainy weather. How are you doing?
I'm good, Daniela. Sendo, magandang umaga din.
Morning, Sec, and of course, Daniela, morning.
All right, gentlemen, we're finally here. The question of having a price cap is going to happen. That's tomorrow. Your reaction to this, is this something that needed to happen or were you caught off guard?
Siguro if I can start,
go ahead,
Daniela.
Sir Leonardo.
First of all, in-acknowledge namin, Daniela, yung magandang layunin o intensyon ng ating Pangulo sa pag-issue ng EO na yan. Kasi siyempre gusto niyang makarating po yung bigas sa abot-kayang presyo, lalo na po sa ating mga mahihirap na kababayan. Pero I think there are a number of unintended side effects na hindi po maganda. First of all, I just want to make the observation na sana nagkaroon po ng puspusang o reasonable degree of consultation bago po inis yung EO. Ito pong mga problema ng mga retailers halimbawa na nabili po nila yung kasalukuyang stock nila sa mas higit po sa price ceiling na itinakda ng EO 39, na paghandaan na po sana yan. Maybe binigyan po sila ng sapat na panahon para ubusin yung stocks.
Okay.
Tapos naka-ready na po yung mga ayuda na sinasabi ngayon. Kasi po mabigat po ang tama talaga nito sa mga retailers po. Malulugi po ang karamihan sa tingin po namin. Ang ikalawa pong po dito, maybe I said kanina, unintended side effects bumabagsak po yung presyo ng palay.
Okay.
We have just received recent information, for example, Pampanga, Sultan Kudarat, at saka North Cotabato, bumagsak na po ng at least 20% po ang presyo po ng palay. At umiiyak po siyempre yung ating mga farmers kasi imbis na makarecover po sila sa mataas po na inputs, mga let's say transport costs, fuel, at iba pa, bumabagsak po yung presyo. Kaya sabi nila, bakit naman ganyan? At lalo pa ngayon, parating na po yung ani, nako, baka lalo pong babagsak daw yung presyo. So, if that will continue, magkakaroon po mawawalan po ng insentibo ang ating mga magpapalay na magpatuloy po ng kanilang produksyon at baka magkaproblema naman po tayo sa mga susunod po na mga buwan.
Okay. Sir, before we go to Sir Rosendo, no, just to follow up on what you said po, Mr. Montemayor, sinabi niyo po, sana you were consulted. Can you confirm that you were not consulted for this situation, especially since this has been a problem long coming na rin?
Opo, wala pong consultation as far as we know sa side po ng mga producer groups. Clearly, even the retailers were caught by surprise. I think even the group of PRISM, yung Philippine Rice Industry Stakeholders Movement na binubuo po principally po ng mga dealers at mga grains retailers, nagulat din po sila.
Okay.
Kaya everyone seems to have been caught by surprise by this. I just want to add very quickly, Daniela.
Sure, yes.
In the same EO, ang sinasabi doon, we still have enough supply of rice to tide us over until the main harvest in a couple of weeks time. Tapos, so enough supply, pero it seems sa analysis, ang main cause ng masyado pong pagmahal ng presyo po ng bigas ay yung pong speculative at saka exploitative behavior po ng mga cartel, mga nag-hoard, at saka nag-smuggle. So kung yun po yung pangunahing dahilan, dapat yan po sana ang in-address ng EO39, hindi po yung retailers.
Okay.
Retailers are just taking the price supplied by the rice suppliers, pinapatungan po ng maliit lang, otherwise kasi kung masyadong malaki rin ang patong nila at retail, talagang hindi na po bibili o babawasan po ng consumer po yung bilihan po nila ng bigas. At yung farmers natin, bakit farmers na naman po ang pinapasakripisyo? Sana naman po at least kung magkaroon man ng EO, siguro magtakda ng floor price for palay.
Correct.
Na bawal po na ang mga trader ay bibili po ng palay sa below that floor price that will give a decent return and income sa ating po mga rice farmers.
Okay. Thank you, sir. We'll go back to some of the issues you pointed out, no? But first, over to Sir Rosendo, your reaction to this, kayo din ba po? You were not consulted and it's a big surprise.
Yeah, ang congressional hearing nag-attend tayo and we brought out na yung presyo kasi ng magsasaka if we could increase the price of NFA price to 22 pesos, no? Na in which ang atin from 19 pesos to 22, no? Last season kasi ang buying price ng NFA is 19 and the average price of buying price is around from January 19 pesos to umabot ng 22 pesos, no? At 20 pesos ng May, average price of buying price ng palay. So we have suggested na dapat increase yung presyo ng NFA sa 22 kasi we are seeing the global market going up and Thailand farmers is selling their palay at 19 pesos, no? And we suggest dapat mas mataas dito sa atin. And ito naman is yung presyo na 45 if we compute back, no? Pabalik. So ito is between 23 pesos to 25 pesos na palay. Na in which this is higher than last harvest na average price from January to May is around 20 pesos, no? Yun ang average na price na nabili dito sa buong Pilipinas. Ibig sabihin may 22, may 23, may 17 and 18 pesos. So yun ang average na nakuha natin. And we think na yung presyo naman na 45, kikita na yung retailer kung doon ang computation, and kikita na yung rice miller. We talk with the rice miller sa 24 to 25 pesos of meal, imi-meal nila yung palay. Ang lalabas nito is around delivered sa Manila is 41 pesos. No? Ang net income nila, ang net price nila is 38 pesos kung magiling yung 25 pesos sa well-milled rice. No? So ibig sabihin, pag ito is na meal ng miller, deliver sa Manila, may 2 pesos silang marked up to 40 plus 1 pesos delivery, may kita na yung rice miller. And delivered to Manila is 41 pesos, and yung wholesaler will sell to the retailer marked up of 2 pesos. May kita na rin yung wholesaler ng 2 piso, and yung retailer kikita na rin ng 2 piso. In which nakita naman natin itong price neto is kikita ang magsasaka, kikita ang rice miller, may kita, no? And ang wholesaler and retailer ang nakikita natin lahat yung food chain walang problema. So yun ang
that's your view, sir. Sir, just to interrupt you, just for us to understand, Sir Montemayor, does this address your question on the floor price? Because you mentioned dapat there's a floor price, but according to Sir Rosendo, nangyayari naman, it's actually higher than the 19 to 22 pesos for the farmers.
Well, sa floor price po, that's part of the kwansana, yung inihanda po na package of, shall we say, relief or measures to lessen yung masama pong epekto sa ating mga magpapalay. So kung may floor price, pwede naman i-compute kung magkano yan, itakda sana ng EO yan. Ngayon, sa side po naman ng retailers, kasi po ang malaking immediate pasanin po rito aside from the farmers natin sa retailers Kung pipilitin po natin na to live with the 41 pesos or 45 pesos price ceiling, tapos binili naman po yung kanilang stocks at let's say 46 upwards. Paano po magsusurvive yung business nila? Either titigil po sila o di kaya so magle-lay off po ng kanilang mga tauhan sa mga wet markets, mga palengke. Kasi siyempre pag nasa negosyo ka, at least man lamang ma-recover mo yung costs mo and add a little profit. Now, based on the statements kanina ni kasamang Sendo, it seems na ang problema po sa pagbulusok po ng presyo ng bigas, hindi po sa retailer hindi po sa farmer, it's on the trader side, yung namimili po ng palay at yung ginagawa pong bigas yan. So bakit hindi po yung ang habulin po ng gobyerno? Identify naman po, di ba? May mga hoarders, may mga speculators, etc. Ang laki-laki po ng intelligence fund ng ating pamahalaan. Siguro by this time, alam na nila kung sino-sino yung mga yan, lalo na yung mga malalaking nag-hoard. Ayan po sana talagang atupagin. At siguro pag mangyari yan, the less prominent players sa sektor na yan, magiging mas matino po sila. At hindi mo nila masyadong itataas beyond reasonable levels po yung presyo po ng sinusupply po nila sa mga retailer natin.
Okay. Let's take a step back on the issue of the rice supply, because there's one side po na sinabi niyo po, it's the rice hoarding that's causing the high prices. And then on the other hand, I've had some people on the show already saying na wala lang talagang global supply, there's climate change, madaming typhoons, hindi lang talaga natin matakda yung amount of supply. There was a ban on the exports of India, which is the ones really causing this high prices of rice, and not naman po the hoarding. If we take out the hoarding, it's not really going to make any difference. Sir Rosendo, do you have comments on that?
Yeah, for the past month, yung interview natin, sinasabi natin there's no shortage in our side, and after December, we have also 64 days after December. na may stocks tayo. And wala tayong nakikitang shortage. And in which, kung makita mo, with what happened now, talaga wala tayong shortage. Yung puno ng bodega dun sa mga area ng Bulacan and other area. So, it means walang shortage. What happened is those miller in some in Bulacan, bumili sila ng mas mataas na presyo na palay, no? From not only from the farmers and from the miller. Bumili sila up to 31 pesos kasi hinahabol nila yung global market. Na in which dapat hindi ganun, no? Dapat tama lang yung presyo, at least hindi sumipa ng ganung kataas. Na in which kung makita mo yung mga congressman pumunta pa sa Bulacan and to check what is happening. And I think they are on the right direction, no, para at least malaman ng tao na hindi ito dapat laruin, no, dahil ito is food security natin ang magkakaproblema if the price went up. And I think the direction is very good kasi at least nakita ng mga nagho-hoard or nagtatago na hindi pwedeng ganun. The government will come in, no? But we still think that the farmers will, yung presyo na 23 to 25 pesos, may kita yung farmers. Kasi last season, ang presyo ng pataba is 2,700. No? So 1 hectare, ang cost nila is 21,000 sa 8 bags, no? Ngayon, this coming season, ang average price is nasa 1,700.
Okay.
So sa 8 bags, it's only 12,000 pesos. Tapos may subsidy pang government na 4,000 subsidy for fertilizer. So yung cost of production bumaba. No? So ang nakikita natin from 50 to 55,000, ang cost of production nasa 45,000. In 1 hectare, the minimum, the average yield is 4.2 tons or sa isang hektarya ang lalabas sa 25 pesos is almost 105,000 pesos, no? And yung 105,000 pesos less 45,000, isang magsasaka minimum have 50,000. So ang tingin natin fair yung price, and we think in the long run it will help the farmers, no? Dahil dun sa presyong yun, tatanim ulit ang mga magsasaka. We are seeing Tarlac, yung harvest ng magsasaka is nagtatanim na sila ulit, no? So,
sir, just to clarify your position, no, you're saying that the rice cap, putting a rice cap is actually okay lang naman. There's a profit still to be gained for the farmers. How long should this cap be in place? Is this a long-term solution? Maybe not necessarily a price cap, but at least, suggested retail price that is more beneficial to the consumers, that there's, at least alam natin yung maximum level ng rice. So is this a band-aid solution?
I think sa ngayon kailangan yun, no? Pero kung dating ng October, maniwala ka mas mababa sa 45 pa yung presyo ng well-milled rice.
Okay.
Yun ang nakikita natin. Kasi yung bumper harvest natin by October to November, doon ang peak ng harvest. So nakikita natin the cap, no, baka will end after October. Kasi yung well-milled rice sa tingin namin bababa pa sa 44 to 43 pesos.
Okay. Sir Montemayor, you mentioned that the issue po is hoarding. What is a more effective solution to this problem rather than these price caps?
Yeah, yung sinasabing hoarding, mismo ang ating pamahalaan po ang nagsasabi na yan po isang pangunahing dahilan dito sa pagmahal ng bigas. So ang solusyon, di patupad po na may mga batas naman po tayo, hindi ba, against hoarding tsaka speculative and anti-competitive behavior. So dapat noon pa po sana ginagawa yan. O di kung hindi ginagawa noon in a consistent manner, all the more, dapat pag-ibayuhin po ng ating pamahalaan ang pagpapatupad po ng nasasabing batas. So if it means more visits, more inspections of bodegas, of suspected hoarders, padlocking, di dapat yun ang gawin. At saka mag-file na ng kaso. As far as I know, Daniela, until now, wala naman pong kasong pinapile sa mga suspected hoarders na nahuli yata nila Speaker Romualdez at saka po yung taga Bureau of Customs. Isa pang siguro unintended side effect ng pagpapadlock po ng mga bodega ng suspected hoarders at saka smugglers ay habang hindi pa po napoproduce nila yung mga documents sa Bureau of Customs na nagpapatunay na ito yung mga lehitimong stocks, hindi po makarelease po ng bigas sa merkado. So at imbis na makadagdag po sana sa supply ng bigas para makatulong po sa pag-moderate ng price increases, nakabinbin po yan sa mga bodega. So
Correct.
that's the other side of this
Oo nga.
aggressive move against hoarders which leads to padlocking of bodegas.
Okay, but sir, wouldn't that lead nga to more underground activities, no? Especially if, just to take a step back, no, you've also been a former agriculture secretary. How can we define hoarding? Because a lot of times, sinasabi, that's just keeping the stock and waiting for the right price, lalo na for the retailers, to be able to sell it at a profit. Hindi naman daw hoarding yan. How can you define po hoarding? And if you do say, okay, hoarding ka talaga, and then you block it, and you're not allowed to sell it, wouldn't that cause even more price jumps in the market?
Siyempre, yung hoarding, very medyo may kahirapan po sa operationalize po ng kahulugan ng hoarding. Kasi alimbawa, ako po'y umangkat po ng bigas from Vietnam. And then, if you import now from Vietnam, siguro pinakamababang selling price niyan at retail will be in the vicinity of 60 pesos per kilo. Below that, lugi na ako.
Correct.
So, in fact, the government wants more imports to come in. Now, pagpasok po ng bigas na yan, nakita ko may price cap na 45 sa well-milled rice. I-release ko ba yung stocks ko na alam ko na for every kilo that I will release to the market, I will lose 15 pesos per kilo. So, kung in response to that situation, paano kung yung importer, hindi niya muna i-release yung kanyang stocks? Diba?
Hoarder
Kasi
ba siya,
otherwise,
sir?
the more his stocks he releases, at the 45 pesos mandatory price cap, the more he will lose. So it's not going to be hoarding. Especially if the importer shows papers galing na attested to also by the Bureau of Customs na ang kanyang presyo po ng imported rice niya upon payment of the proper tariffs, etc., 60 pesos. So will the Bureau of Customs force him now to release his stocks and maybe file a case against him for hoarding?
Correct.
It doesn't make business sense, di ba?
Hindi nga.
Na
No, sir. So,
ganun ang
how
gagawin natin sa
do
mga
you...
legitimate businessmen.
Oo. So, how would you define hoarding? Just in a very clear manner that is not to do... Kasi they can always make the excuse that you already mentioned, sir, na masyadong mababa yung presyo compared to what they bought.
Well, siguro there can be some concrete parameters like beyond a certain time limit, baka may possibility, may hoarding yan. So, alam mo, hinawakan mo yung stocks mo by more than 2 or 3 months sa bigas. That could be kumbaga parang alarm signal. But as I mentioned earlier, dapat tignan din yung circumstansya kung bakit hindi pa siya nagre-release ng bigas niya. Maaring lugi siya pag mag-release. O kaya gusto niya tingi-tingi po ang pag-release kasi parating na po yung natin yung main harvest, di ba? So pagka bibiglain niya baka sasabay po lalong bagsak po yung presyo na matatamasa po ng ng rice
Sir
rice
Rosendo,
businessman. So and I suppose Daniela, by this time ang tagal-tagal na yung mga anti-hoarding na yan na
oo nga
di ba mga patas. You mean to say
mahirap.
Until now, there is no definition to guide our law enforcement agencies.
Sir Rosendo, can you jump in? Kasi actually, it's not just a rice issue, yung hoarding. You see that in sugar, di ba? Marami, most stocks of any
And
agricultural good.
ah, Daniela, ano no? Ang ano kasi, ang isang nakikita natin, ang perception ng lahat, is yung pumapasok from India, from Thailand, lahat ito is well-milled rice. Hindi, ano? To explain that, yung mga nagbibili ng mas mataas sa Thailand, pumapasok ito, is not a well-milled rice. This is a special rice na pupunta sa mga restaurant. So, yung presyong yan is mas mataas yan kaysa yung well-milled rice. Maski pumunta ka sa atin sa Japan, itong Vietnam and Thailand, may mga grade na ito percentage ng broken. This is well-milled rice. Pero yung special grade na mas mataas, ito is hindi well-milled rice. So, ang sinasabi lang ng EO is yung well-milled rice at yung regular meal ang babantayan.
Okay.
No? Pero
Okay.
yung mga special rice na pumasok na 60 pesos, bebenta sa mga restaurant kasi yung mga restaurant kasi may mas gusto nila yung maalsa and other thing. So may special rice talaga ito. Na in which hindi naman kinakap ng ating government yan. So yung mga yun can also sell in the market with a higher price. Pero ang binabantay natin itong well-milled rice and regular milled rice para at least yung mga ibang consumer na hindi gumagamit noon is gagamitin, no? And yung sa rate ng Bureau of Customs dun sa mga warehouses. Ang tanong ko sa Bureau of Customs is bakit nakalabas yan, no? Paano nakapunta sa warehouse yan? On the data we gathered, we are looking around 400,000 metric tons of smuggled rice from January to August. So, yung nakita nila is tip of the iceberg. No? Kung sasabihin nila, smuggle yung iba. And paano nakalabas yun? Yun ang question natin sa Bureau of Customs. Kung paano napunta dun sa warehouse, may kasabwat yan sa Bureau of Customs. Dapat hanapin nila kung sino kasabwat and paano nakalabas sa warehouse. Night which ang nakita natin, yung mga nasa warehouses, yung mga iba nagpapakita ng papeles, ayaw nilang tingnan. Submit nyo. Dapat kung pupunta ka sa isang lugar and to check everything, dapat may dokumento kayo na itong warehouse talaga, no document. No? So, para hindi kawawa yung mga legitimate importer naman na
That are following the rules.
Yun ang nakikita natin. So ito is ang kita natin dun sa Bulacan baka 10% lang ang magkakaproblema doon, no? Yung 90% i-release din nila. So yun ang malaking problema doon.
Okay. Sir, we'll continue the conversation after a quick break. Keep it here on One News, all sides, all the time. Welcome back to Agenda. I'm Danie Laurel. We still have with us Sinag President Rosendo and Federation of Free Farmers Chairman Leonardo Montemayor. Welcome back, sirs. Now, we were discussing before the break, let's say a bit of opposing positions here. You have Mr. Montemayor saying that they were not consulted for this rice cap. There's the issue of hoarding that needs to be addressed in the value chain rather than the retail side, because if the rice cap is too harmful for business profit, they could just shut down operations, diba? And then mas lalo tayong magkakaproblema. Whereas we have Sir Rosendo earlier on pointing out that this amount, 41 to 45 pesos, meron namang profit yung farmers, no? But now, anyway, it's going to happen from tomorrow already. So, bygones be bygones. Just going back to Sir Montemayor, no? Since this is happening already, until when do you think this cap should last? And should there be a mechanism po in place where, if we hit a certain, parang fuel, diba? If we hit a certain level, there is a level of regulation. And then when there's a lot of stocks in the market, which we're expecting already in the month of September, you can take out the price caps.
Yeah. Sa amin kasi, Daniela, considering na nag-upisa na nga yung main harvest, di ba, in some areas. And then, some couple of weeks from now, talagang kanyan, todo na po yung harvest natin. So the supply will be there soon. So there is no more, I think, critical need to continue the EO. As I mentioned earlier kasi, immediate po ang naging impact na so far na hindi maganda. Although, of course, hindi naman po yan sinasadya. Naging byproduct po ng siguro hindi na foresee na problema. Impact po lalo na sa ating mga magsasaka, talagang bumagsak po at bumabagsak pa ang presyo po ng palay. At pagpasok po ng main harvest, tapos kung nandyan pa rin po yung EO, lalo pong babagsak ang presyo. At kawawa po yung ating mga magsasaka na imbis na makarecover ng konti, sana nagdaan pong mga bagyo, mga gastos po sa kanilang inputs, lalo po silang mapaparusa. Sa bagay na hindi naman po silang may kasalanan niyan. So, and then of course, we know from the side of the retailers, I think almost all of them nagre-reklamo po kasi talagang palugi po sila eh. So, knowing that, kahit mabigyan po ng ayuda sana agad ng DTI, until now, hindi nga maliwanag kung anong klaseng ayuda bibigay sa retailers. Tapos sa farmers natin, hindi maliwanag kung anong gagawing action para maiwasan po yung masyadong mababang presyo ng palay. I suggested earlier, bakit hindi rin magtakda ng floor price? So, unless ma-address ito agad, ang aming pong rekomendasyon ay agad-agad i-recall po itong EO.
Okay. Sir Rosendo, can you say that too little, too late? Kasi in August na siya nag-increase, diba? Between 4 to 14% inflation in the rice prices in the month of August. So this price cap should have happened way before this price increases to the consumers that happened. Is it too late, as Mr. Montemayor said?
Yeah. Ang tingin ko, tama yung price cap dahil some traders is buying panicking, buying at 31 pesos na palay. Na in which it's not good kasi ito is binase nila doon sa import price ng coming from Vietnam and Thailand. Na ang tingin natin dapat hindi nagawa yun kasi ang bumibili is yung mga taga Bulacan, doon sa 31 to 34 pesos. Na in which kung makita mo doon sa mga warehouse nila, ang dami ng bigas. So, hindi magandang nagawa yun. Kasi ang nangyari, nasa ground tayo, nakita natin, bumili sila not only from the farmers, they also bought from the rice miller. Na dapat hindi ganon. So ang nangyari, kaya tumaas yung presyo, pati local. Ang gusto ng itong mga iba is para at least yung mga imported makabenta, kasi mas maraming imported ngayon, pinapataas nila yung local produce natin. Na ang tingin natin, mali yun. Dapat yung local produce natin i-out ng tamang presyo at may 45 pesos dun sa market para hindi lahat pumunta sa 50 to 55 pesos. Yun ang nakita natin, no? And in which I think yung rate dun sa mga warehouse may tama rin yun, no? Para hindi mag-stocks yung mga taga dun sa area na yon, dahil nakikita naman natin bumibili sila sa Pangasinan, bumibili sila sa Nueva Ecija, bumibili sila sa Isabela. So tapos ang dami palang stocks, no? So dapat talaga bumalik sa 25 pesos yung stocks kasi sa Daniela, kasi ngayon ang so far na harvest is at Tarlac area, some in Pangasinan, konti pa lang sa Nueva Ecija. Kung hindi natin iset itong presyong itong 45 pesos, may mga traders will take advantage na bibili sa mataas na presyo na palay. And para tumaas yung presyo ng bigas na may hawak pa sila, no? Mas maganda is at least na set yung presyo by next month, no? October, sa tingin ko automatic yan tatanggalin yung cap, no? Dahil may mas mababa sa 45 pesos na yung presyo dun sa merkado.
Okay. But sir, given
Siguro,
that...
Daniela, if I can
Go
add,
ahead. Yes,
moving
please.
forward, lalo na kung itutuloy itong EO39, dapat agad-agad po yung NFA gagalaw So on that point, I agree with Sento na although it should have been done much earlier, no? But dapat, first of all, dapat itaas yung procurement price ng NFA. Dati kasi yung ayaw po kasi ang NFA Council, sila po nagpapasya kung magkano po yung buying price ng NFA. That is principally ang made up of the economic managers. Ayaw naman nilang i-adjust pataas from 19 to maybe 22, ganyan, para maging competitive yung presyo po ng NFA against the private sector. So I think it's high time the buying price of NFA should be adjusted reasonably upwards. Of course, that will require a much bigger budget. Tapos lakihan po ng NFA ang buying ng palay. But that's easier said than done kasi it will take time to first of all, how much will the DBM be willing, di ba, to set aside as additional procurement budget of NFA over and above the usual around 8 billion po na procurement budget po ng NFA, and how quickly can this be released to the NFA, and how quickly can NFA procure the palay from our farmers. So at least ma-minimize po ng konti yung pagbagsak po ng presyo ng palay, resulting as an unintended effect, let me emphasize, na sa issuance po ng EO39.
All right, gentlemen, that's all the time we have for today. But as mentioned, no, you highlighted some key points here in terms of the prices, protecting the farmers, pa rin both of you agreed on that with the higher or at least a floor price for the farmers, and then hopefully temporary solution only until the prices go down, which you're expecting to happen quite soon in September. So sana matanggal na po yung EO. In the meantime, it's going to be taking effect tomorrow. So let's see whether the retailers will be following suit. Maraming salamat po, Rosendo and Yoni Montemayor.
Thank you po.
Thank you.
Agenda will be back after a few messages. We are One News, all sides, all the time.
As the government imposes a price cap on rice, the National Economic and Development Authority, or NEDA, clarifies that this is only a temporary measure. The agency noted that the imposition of a price ceiling will allow government to immediately bring down prices for the benefit of Filipinos. Consequently, it also discourages hoarding, which is one of the ways why prices shoot up. Based on NEDA's data, the rice inflation rate increased to 4.2% in July, from only 1% in January. NEDA also said that the country has enough rice for the end of the year as harvest season starts this September, while the government also has additional import orders. Let's discuss the matter on today's agenda.
Sonny Africa is the executive director of Ibon Foundation, a non-stock non-profit group that tackles socio-economic issues through research and education. Africa is also board member of Alter Media and a fellow of the Center for People Empowerment in Governance.
Welcome back to Agenda. I'm Danie Laurel, and with us now is Ibon Foundation President Sonny Africa. Good morning, Sonny.
Hi, morning, Danny, to viewers.
All right, so earlier on in the show, we had Rosendo, and we also had former Secretary Montemayor discussing this issue on the rice cap. Now, with you, we want to discuss a little bit more on the impact on the economy. Tell us, is this the only solution that we have at this point to address what is very, very high inflation in a staple that we need on our tables on a daily basis?
I only caught the last part of the interview, but I think they're being very polite. The rice caps, unfortunately, it seems to be a very desperate stopgap populist measure. The problem of expensive rice in the Philippines is very deeply rooted in inefficient production and expensive production. Rice controls for Ibon, price controls are a tool, but when you build something, you need lots of tools. Using a single tool like price controls, expecting that to be enough, I think could be very disruptive. So in our view, it seems to be a very rushed executive order. It might have been released to preempt in a way, the release of the inflation figures, I think tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, which might show an increase in rice prices. It seems to be a show of action, but it's far from enough to actually do anything to really lower the price of rice because it doesn't address the roots of the problem. It might not actually even address the symptoms of the problem, to be honest.
Okay, well, let's go to the roots of the problem then, because we've had this discussion on the prices of rice, and many are pointing fingers to everywhere. Like you mentioned, we should have had, we're a rice growing country, we should not have this issue. But at the same time, they've been mentioning, due to climate change, due to our position geographically, we cannot expect to be completely self-sufficient. We've never been self-sufficient due to the, Ukraine-Russia war, the fertilizer prices. These are things that we could not have prevented anyway, at least this year, the past year. Do you agree with that? Or were there other things that could have been done, to put down the prices of rice?
Danny, in our view, we have to work with what we have. We may not have the Mekong Delta and, so much water that, Thailand and Cambodia has, but we work with what we have. In the Philippines right now, if we want to improve rice production, we have to provide more water to our rice farmers. And about a third of our rice land still isn't irrigated. So the fact that, for instance, we have a 1.4 trillion budget for infrastructure next year, barely 2%, about 31 billion is spent for irrigation. I think that says a lot about the priorities of the government in terms of providing the basic irrigation water sources for our rice farmers. Secondly, yes, it is actually not easy to lower the price of rice. It's not easy to make food production cheaper, more efficient. But we have to do what other countries as riders have done. We have to spend on our supporting our rice farmers. And that goes the whole range from the inputs to the infrastructure, to the post-harvest facilities, to the marketing support. The thing is, over the last 30, 40 years, our rice support has just basically been a price subsidy through NFA. And that's been problematic. There was never any real support to make rice cheaper, no real support to rice farmers to make it more remunerative for them to earn more from planting rice. So they've been bleeding from planting rice to other activities. So the bottom line for us is price controls, they should be one of a whole template, a whole basket of tools. But if the government thinks that there's only one tool needed to control prices, like the rice controls right now, we don't think they thought it up very well. This might actually even be genuinely an idea of the president, because it's so not well thought out. It is so rushed.
Biglaan.
It has no sense of the deeper problems. It actually might be more disruptive than helpful, to be fair.
And what was mentioned nga, we expect the prices to go down anyway below this 41 to 45 cap. So it might a little bit too late. Sir, you mentioned no that we should be investing in our own irrigation systems. But from an economic perspective, does that make sense when it's cheaper to import? And to what extent can we balance out, our needs in a growing population that needs to be fed and people already struggling with paying for things, to focusing the budgets on, developing something where unfortunately we're much more inefficient?
Inefficiency is something that we work on. For us, it always seems cheaper in the short term to import cheaper rice from abroad. That seems to satisfy the consumer need for cheap rice. But we have to also remember, it is a staple food. It is something that should not just be viewed in market terms. It also should be viewed in terms of long-term food security. Also in terms of the capacity of rice farmers to earn a proper living. Now, if the thinking always is that it's cheaper to import than produce, it misses out two things. One, the long-term implications of depending on imports, and we have what's happening right now, countries like India, in the past even Vietnam has tried imposing export controls to ensure that there's enough food for themselves. So that misses out the idea that it's hindi only ang rice, ang imported rice. Secondly, because it's not only, it also forgets the fact that we also have to support the incomes of our rice farmers for them to even start to be efficient to begin with. If there's not enough support for them, they won't be able to compete in the market. They're going to be sort of, marginal farmers going bankrupt, will leave rice farming. So if the government doesn't realize those two things and gives more support, rice is not going to be cheaper. For instance, one example, the budget is being talked about right now. The National Rice Program for 2024 is going to be increased by about 1.9%. Doesn't even keep up with inflation. The rice program, the National Rice Program, increased to about 31 billion pesos. That's not going to do anything. It doesn't indicate any intent to make rice cheaper. And if the government thinks that, or if the president himself, I don't think our economists are behind this measure. If the president thinks that yung pala panahon na price caps will make a dent, that is just, it's not even, I'm not even going to say it's a band-aid or a palliative solution, but it's not going to work. It's just one tool. It should be just one tool among a whole range of tools that should be implemented to build the domestic rice industry.
But they did mention that, sir. So you've got NED Secretary Balisacan saying this is not just the only measure, diba? This is not, that's what it's not a standalone measure. He also mentioned that, the harvest will be going down. And again, the government crackdown on the rice hoarders that will also address the issue on supply and cheaper rice. So your comments on that they're saying they're doing naman other measures here.
Talk is cheap, I think. And I would really point the public to look at the government budget for the rice program in 2024. It's a 1.9% increase that doesn't even keep up with inflation. It's not even enough to begin with. So any talk that there is enough support for rice producers to make it cheaper, more efficient, the talk is there, the walk isn't there. And I think that's one thing we have to be very, very careful about. A lot of the government policy measures right now, they're like populist gimmickry to sort of dazzle us with a show of action. But in the end, that's why rice keeps becoming more expensive. That's why jobs aren't being created. That's why household incomes are falling, because we're being dazzled with talk, but there's no walk behind it.
What's the alternative solution here?
For us, we think price control should be seen as one among a basket of tools. The government should provide the whole range of support for the rice industry. I mean, for the price caps, we of course want effective enforcement, not selective enforcement for traders, a few traders for show. We want, bottom line, a high producer support price to make rice farming remunerative. We want public subsidies for the whole range of supports, starting from investments in irrigation to investing in extension services, research and technology, even actually cheap inputs, organic fertilizer, herbicides, pesticides, crop insurance, then going all the way to farm to market roads, post-harvest facilities, even actually retail outlets and strengthening the NFA. If that whole range of measures isn't done, the rice will not become cheaper, farmers will suffer, consumers will suffer.
Sir, what has PBBM as Agri-Chief done in terms of your list? You have a laundry list of things that needed to have been addressed before we got to this price cap situation in his more than year in office. What has been addressed, at least in your point of view?
Well, the nasty comment is he's been able to find more confidential funds for the Department of Agriculture, which is very peculiar. But for us, it was a good direction. His claim that being president, he would be able to be more decisive, generate more resources for agriculture. I think that in principle was a good thing. But then the budget increases he was showing, they only seem large because of recent budget cuts under President Duterte. Still now, the agriculture budget is about 3.5% of the national budget. It's actually even below the 5.5% historical average over the last 40 years. So bottom line, we can actually help our rice farmers. We can actually produce food cheaper, but we have to invest, not in these big ticket infrastructure projects, transport projects, but we have to invest in the whole range of the production chain. I mean, the president talks about the value chain of production. I think he knows in general the whole production line for producing cheap food, but he has to have the budget for it. And if in the end, if the government thinks that fiscal consolidation means cheapening the budget for agriculture and social services, that puts the burden on the people to try to cope, and that I think that's very, very unfair, considering the huge resources the government has to make food cheaper for every Filipino.
Would appointing a successor at this point make any difference? Because, as you mentioned, he has the clout to get the funds into this very important sector.
I think it's never too late. It would be good to appoint a successor, though, who has a longer-term view of our food security problem. If the successor has the same framework that, it's cheaper to import from abroad, without realizing there's a national security concern in terms of producing enough of our staple. There's also a concern about ensuring livelihoods for rural producers. If the appointee has the same sort of kind of obsolete and not really very practical, liberalized agriculture to develop it. That's been done for 40 years right now. Agriculture has fallen to its smallest share of the economy and employment in the country's history. So a new successor, a new DA secretary would be good, but preferably someone with new ideas, not the old ideas that really haven't worked for the past 40 years.
Okay, let's talk about hoarding. No, we were talking about it earlier on that it's very difficult to pinpoint who's hoarding, because if you bought rice and imported it at such a high price, it's just a business decision for you not to sell it and to keep the stocks. It's the same with the sugar issue. This is an economic problem, it seems. Hoarding, how can it be addressed by going to the stock room, locking and padlocking? Is this something that could dramatically alter the prices in the market?
The government actually knows who the big wholesalers and who the big retailers are. In all honesty, a small retailer hoarding doesn't have much influence on the market. There have been so many Senate hearings already on the rice cartel. In all honesty, if they wanted to, they could choose who among the maybe, I think, 10 to 15,000 big wholesalers and retailers there are. I think they can identify the key points of action. But if the government lets some hoarders, speculators off the hook while putting a show of capturing others, of cracking down on others, that doesn't really fix the problem. And I think right now, it is actually will be good to notice who among the big retailer, the big wholesalers, retailers will actually comply with with, with the price controls. The government knows who they are. I mean, it's no
Interesting.
secret who the big cartels are.
Okay, we have this issue now. 51 million Filipinos facing moderate or severe food insecurity in 2000. That was a UN estimate of food security. Where do we even begin? We're actually the majority or highest number in the region, more than or almost half of the Southeast Asia nation. Now, give us an idea of where do we begin to address moderate and severe food insecurity in the past 2 years, and are we at least addressing that? Are we getting away from that, or are we getting ourselves deeper and deeper into this food crisis, if you can call it that?
They're short-term palliatives. I mean, band-aids aren't necessarily bad, but they have to be understood to be band-aids. I think there are short-term measures to be taken and also medium to long-term measures. The basic short-term measure really is, as you mentioned, make sure that there's no price manipulation by hoarders. That unnecessarily, unjustly, unfairly increases prices to increase profits. But I think that's only the start. We also have to increase the purchasing power of Filipinos. Again, government policy has to appreciate jobs aren't being created. I mean, pseudo jobs are being created. Parang dumidiskarte lang mga Pilipino. The government has to intervene much stronger to increase the purchasing power of Filipinos. That actually should spur a supply response, because people will produce if there's a market for it. So increasing the purchasing power both has a short-term effect in terms of making food more affordable, but also should spur a rural producer response. And that's where we segue to actually make that supply response valid. For it to actually happen, there has to be support in the medium to long term for Philippine agriculture, for the rural sectors. And if the government is not putting the budget for that, we're going to be stuck in this vicious cycle that there's not enough purchasing power. It's not profitable to produce food. Food's going to be expensive, and then people don't have the purchasing power for the food, and then food insecurity worsens. I think that vicious cycle can be broken, but it does need aggressive government support, both on the demand side in terms of household purchasing power, but also on the supply side, making food cheaper, giving opportunities to local producers, including, as an addendum, cracking down on traders and exploitative importers.
Okay, last question, sir, before we let you go. Marcos Jr. approved the DTI's 3-year food logistics agenda. What do you think of this in addressing at least food insecurity?
We have so many agendas. We've had so many agendas for about 40 years now. Again, if the government doesn't put its money where its mouth is, these will be put to the government websites. They'll be rolled out every time there's a budget season, but it won't happen. I think it's a comprehensive problem. I have to really stress, all these are small tools, but we need a package of tools to address food security, the food crisis in the country. If you're relying on a few tools to actually help, that is just for show. And I think we're way beyond that. If the government appreciates the magnitude of the problem, the huge interventions needed should actually be prompted as well. But if you're not seeing the magnitude of response needed, it's all for show, and I think that's so disappointing. It's an injustice to Filipino consumers and Filipino producers.
Okay, so more intensive and massive program action needed to be done rather than short-term,
More
small...
sincerity about the problem, Dan. It's so crazy. I mean, it's a long-standing problems, but we're like running around like headless chickens because we're not addressing the roots of the problem.
All right. Thank you so much for your time and insights. That was Ibon Foundation Executive Director, Sonny Africa. Thank you, Sonny.
Thanks, Danie. Good morning.
And that's today's agenda. Keep it here on Cignal TV channels 8 and 250 for the latest. Sitting in for Cito Beltran, I'm Danie Laurel. We are One News, all sides, all the time.